All right, everyone, welcome back. Everything is changing right now with AI specifically. And I was curious, what does not change for leaders? What's the part that's actually eternal? And so I invited a leadership coach, executive coach, and biblical man, Dr. William Attaway, to be here. So let's do this, guys. William, welcome to the show.
Simon, thanks so much for having me, man. I'm excited to be here.
So before we go to AI is changing everything in leadership and how do we adapt, what is actually not changing?
Mm. I think what's not changing is the importance of the human factor. The AI is fantastic at helping us become more efficient, to build workflows and accomplish more, but it's not ever going to take the place of the human interaction that you and I have. AI cannot show true appreciation. AI cannot see you and hear you on a level beneath what is being said. Only humans can do that.
You named your company around appreciation. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so actually, it's a company that we just acquired a handful of months ago. It's called Appreciation at Work, and the focus here is around the idea that people receive appreciation in different ways. If you're familiar with the Five Love Languages by Gary Chapman, what Dr. Paul White did is take that framework and say, what does it look like in the workplace to show appreciation? What does it look like to communicate with people the way they are wired instead of the way we are wired or the way we think they should be? And that really was the impetus behind the book, The Five Languages of Appreciation in the Workplace. This book is going into its 14th year of publication. Over 800,000 copies have been sold worldwide. And we have done work with companies all over the world. Over 470,000 people have been a part of our trainings or taken our assessment. And one of the things that I love about getting involved in this company is that it's really focused on the individual. And that plays into what you mentioned earlier. I'm a person of faith. I think that every person is created in the image of God. And when we learn to treat them with respect and dignity, part of that is learning how to speak according to how they are wired when it comes to appreciation.
What are the five languages?
So the five languages have the same names as the five love languages, but they look a little different in the workplace, of course. The first one is words of affirmation. And about 44% of people statistically have this one. And this is what we might think, right? This is when we speak and we say, hey, man, Simon, you did such a great job on this project. You made such a big impact. I'm so glad you're here. Thank you for all the hard work. We're so grateful for your input and your insight. These are words of affirmation. I'm being specific. I'm personalizing it for you. I'm talking about what you specifically did on a project. And I'm letting you know that it's not just about what you did, it's about you as a person, right? That's the difference between reward or recognition and appreciation. Recognition is about performance. Appreciation is about the person. And so words of affirmation, that's 44% of people would come out and say, hey, this is, according to the survey and the research that we've done, 44% say this is my language of appreciation. But what that means is that 56% of people are something else. And this is the problem, because a whole lot of leaders think that you can do a one size fits all approach to this. So they're going to speak words of affirmation to everybody thinking that's going to be enough, when 56% of your people have a different language. Another language is quality time. This is quality time that you spend, typically, depending on your generation, who you spend time with matters. For boomers and Gen Xers like me, this is typically a boss, right? A mentor. We saw this as a mentor opportunity in a relationship. You quality time where you're learning from your supervisor, your boss, or your leader. But what we found is that for millennials and Gen Z, that's not true. Quality time for them is quality time with their peers. And so creating opportunities and creating an environment where that can happen is critical for a leader who really wants to speak into their language. Another language is acts of service. And in the workplace, what does this look like? Well, it's when you start removing obstacles for team members. Hey, I see you're trying to accomplish this and there's something in the way. Let me help you out there. Is that all right? I want to come alongside. I want to help you to win. When you do an act of service like that for a coworker, you're speaking into that language. Another one is tangible gifts. And this is what you typically might think of, particularly in a corporate setting, gift cards, right? This is the tangible thing. Maybe if it's a larger company, a trip, right? This is a bonus. These are things that are tangible that you're giving. But interestingly, only 9% of people say tangible gifts are their language of appreciation. Well, that means 91% of people, their language is something else. So if all you're doing is tangible gifts, you're missing over 90% of your team. The last language is physical touch. And of course, this looks far different in the workplace than it does in marriage. But physical touch in the workplace, this is going to be a fist bump or a high five. This is something that, when you're celebrating a completion of a project, something really great happening, where you're going to do that. Now, less than 1% of people statistically say physical touch is their language of appreciation in the workplace. So this is not one you need to lean heavy into. But understanding how people are wired truly does matter, because it allows you to speak to them in the best way they're going to receive it.
So I guess what's not changing, the eternal part of leadership, is humans still want to be seen, understood,
Yes,
but there are 5 different ways, and some of them they really speak to only 1%.
that's right. That's
And
exactly right.
so it's kind of
Yeah,
important to know that, right, as a leader.
well, it is. And if you really want to step into what leadership is, it really is about helping your people that you lead feel seen and heard and known. When somebody feels seen and heard and known as a person, not as a cog in the machine for what they do, but as an individual human being, when they feel seen and heard and known in that way, they lean in. And this increases retention. And that always is reflected on the bottom line. And you see people stepping into higher performance when they feel seen and heard and known. There's so many reasons to do this, but at its core, it's really about leadership in the eternal sense. Like you say, it's something that will never change. People are always going to want to be seen and heard and known.
How how does your biblical background show up in your work?
That's a great question. I think the first thing that comes to mind is the value of the individual. One of the things that we talk about with the companies that we work with and the leaders that we pour into is the understanding that you can't treat people as interchangeable. You can't treat people as cogs in a machine. When you do that, they do not feel valued. And that, for me, comes from Scripture, right? What Scripture says is that every person is created in the image of God, every man, every woman. You've never locked eyes with someone that doesn't matter to God. And as a follower of Jesus, that means I've never locked eyes with someone who doesn't matter to me. When we treat people according to that truth, it changes the relationship. In the workplace, regardless of your faith background, understanding that each person has value and each person has worth changes how you treat them. And so that flows directly into the work that we do, understanding that this is going to reflect on the bottom line. This is going to help you move into high performance. This is going to, really help the team operate efficiently and effectively. But at its core, there's a biblical truth there that every person matters.
I'm trying to apply that. Let's say I'm in a project meeting and I'm frustrated about the project moving forward not fast
Mhm.
enough.
Yeah.
From the Christian lens, I look at everybody in there as being godly,
Mhm.
and so I will look at the godly part even when I'm frustrated, and I
Mhm.
might formulate my frustration even expecting more. It doesn't mean that I have to be only accepting all the time. I can still
No.
say I'm expecting more or faster or higher quality or higher standards, because that might be the godly part that I'm speaking to, right?
When you call somebody to higher performance, when you say, "Hey, man, Simon, I see more in you than what's happening right now. I see more potential in you. I think you can operate at a higher level." When I tell you that, I'm calling out the best version of you. I'm letting you know that I see more potential. I think that's one of the kindest things you can do. But what I'm saying is, here's the level of expectation that I have, and here's your current level of performance. And there's a gap there. And I believe you can close that gap. I believe you can. I believe you're capable of it. When I speak in those terms, I'm not compromising my standard of what the expectation is. I'm not compromising on what I want to see happen as a leader. I am letting you know with clarity there's a gap and I want to see you close it. I think that is truly one of the best things a leader can do for the people that they are leading, is to speak truth into them. Words of affirmation in particular, this is not just being nice. This is not just, blowing smoke at people and hoping that they're going to rise to the occasion. Words of affirmation can be calling them to a higher level of performance, saying, hey, I think you've got more in you than I'm seeing right now. And I believe that is a biblical idea. Isn't this what we saw Jesus do in the scriptures? Right? He spoke into people and called out a better version of them. He spoke to them and said, hey, I think there's more in you than that. And even when people didn't believe in themselves, he spoke belief into them. And I think that's what we are called to do as leaders. This is something that does not change.
So we've covered what stays the same. We want to be seen, understood, heard, and we saw the biblical part, seeing the godly in everybody. Now, let's go to the part that's changing. AI is changing how we think, how we work, how we hire, if we even hire. Like everybody said,
That's
well,
right.
I have 17 employees right now on my fingertip. I'm not hiring next year. How is that happening from your perspective?
That's not going to slow down anytime soon. The change that we see in the marketplace right now, this is only going to accelerate. And I think as AI gets better and better and better, and we're seeing this, we're seeing the improvements. As AI continues to improve, it's going to give us greater efficiencies. And that's a gift. And we should leverage that. But we should understand that there are things that AI does well, and there are things that AI can never do. AI cannot be human. AI cannot hear what is beneath what is being said. When I have a team member who comes to me and they're frustrated or they're discouraged, you can read that in their body language, right? And if I say, how are you doing? And they're like, oh, fine. If I take them at face value, I move right on. But because of the ability we have as humans to see beneath what is on the surface, I'm going to prod a little bit deeper there. I'm going to say, hey, it seems like things are not fine. It seems like there's something else going on. Is there any way I can help? This is something AI cannot accomplish. And I think this is one of the things we need to understand as leaders. There are certain things we are never going to be able to outsource. There are certain things we're never going to be able to give to an automated workflow. I use AI. I use automated workflows. They're wonderful. They're a gift. They're fantastic for repetitive tasks. But when it comes to helping people understand that they are seen and heard and known, when it comes to helping people to grow into a better version of themselves, that's something I think only a leader can do. As fast as AI gets, as great as it is, I don't believe it's ever going to be able to do that.
What's your next book?
I'm working on one right now called Catalytic Culture. I released Catalytic Leadership about 4 years ago now, and I'm working on Catalytic Culture because I believe truly it's a job of a leader to establish and protect the culture of their team or their company. Every company, every team, every organization has a culture. You either have one you designed on purpose and you meant to have, and you protect it, or you have one you didn't mean to have, but you have a culture. And I think there's great value in being intentional there and designing a culture on purpose and then learning how to put boundaries in place to protect it. And as you onboard new people, make sure you're communicating that culture in such a way that they know this is how we do it here. This is who we are, so that they can choose whether or not they want to join that team. They can choose whether or not they want to be a part of a culture like that and building that greater and stronger. So that's what the next one's about. I'm hoping to see that in print later this year.
Are you doing it self-published or with a publisher?
That one I'm probably going to do self-published through Amazon, and the reason is because of the flexibility. The revisions are so much faster. A book like this, the five languages of appreciation, that's through a traditional publisher, and there's a lot less flexibility when you go that route. There's pluses and minuses to both, and so that's why I use both.
And tell us about your podcast. It's in a top 1.5% worldwide.
It is. We're in our fourth season. It's called Catalytic Leadership Podcast. And what I do on that show is I interview leaders to mine their stories. I believe that I'm not going to live long enough to make all the mistakes myself. I'd rather learn from other people about the mountains that they climbed that maybe I haven't even thought was possible, or the ditches that they drove into or almost did, so that I can be warned against those things. And so that's what I do on the show. I just interview leaders. It's about a half-hour show to talk with them about what they've learned so far in their journey. What they have gleaned from their experiences. I think you can learn from anybody. Sometimes you learn what not to do, but that can be incredibly valuable. And so we're pushing 300 episodes now of the show, of really listening to the stories of leaders all over the world and learning from their experiences.
What surprised you most?
About the podcast,
Yeah, from your guests.
I think one thing that surprised me most was how much I get out of it personally. I started the show in 2022, and I thought this could be a way that I could provide some value to people who maybe couldn't afford an executive coach, maybe couldn't afford that thing, but this was a way I could provide something where I can pour into them through the stories of other people. And what surprised me is how much I gained from it, from these conversations, and the relationships that I get to build with guests, for years, and how those have continued. I mean, this acquisition we just made with Appreciation at Work, this was an acquisition with a business partner, and that partner was a guest on the podcast, several years ago. We didn't know each other before that, but we have become good friends and now business partners. I never would have foreseen that 4 years ago.
In your work as an executive coach, what is it that people are struggling with right now?
Boy, that's a great question. I think that the number one thing I see people struggling with is confusion and frustration. Confusion around, well, I can't see what's ahead as clearly as I used to. I can't see what the next 10 steps are. I think a lot of people, if you go back 5, 10, 15 years, they would have said they had a lot more clarity around what's ahead. Whether that was true or not is irrelevant. This is how they're feeling. And with the rise of AI, with the pace of change that has increased exponentially, I think that has created more confusion and a lack of clarity. That's a big deal right now, and I'm seeing that with clients and people that I'm working with, and helping them to get to a point of clarity. I think clarity it's like Brene Brown says, clarity is kindness. Clarity is kindness with other people, but clarity is most often kindness with yourself. And if you don't have clarity internally, you're never going to be able to share with others what you don't have. As a leader, this is not an optional add-on. This is critical. And so helping leaders get to a point of clarity themselves, I think is one of the big things that I get to do these days, because people are really lacking that.
As a podcast host, what are your favorite podcasts to listen to?
There are so many, because I'm constantly trying to sharpen my saw and get better at the craft. I grew up listening to Larry King do interviews on CNN, right? And King was a phenomenal interviewer. And I've read a couple of his books on this and how he would prepare. And I think that has served as an inspiration for me. So when I'm listening to shows, I'm listening to interview shows mainly because I want to listen to how they are doing what they're doing.
How,
I love the Craig Rochelle Leadership Podcast. It's a great show,
Craig?
often interviews people. The Andy Stanley Leadership Podcast, same thing. It often interviews people. I want to listen to the questions that they're asking, because I think crafting good questions is a skill, and I want to get better at that. So I listen to people who are doing it so that I can learn from their example.
Larry King is my favorite too. I will never forget. He asked a murderer once, "How does it feel to kill a man?"
Oh, oh, what a question.
Yeah.
Oh,
Uh, I will never forget that question. And so, what was his process of preparing?
to know as much as he could going into it and not be reading off of cards or have feeling like he's tied to a piece of paper. That was a big deal of it. It's internalizing so that you're able to be fully present in the conversation. And that takes time. I mean, if you go back to the early days of our show, like obviously I'm reading off of the script from questions and such. I mean, it was much less conversational. But here, almost 300 episodes in, I'm able to really be present and listen to what the person is saying and listen to what's not being said and really begin to dive into that. And I think that adds a lot more value. And from what I hear from listeners, they get a lot more out of it.
Wonderful. Dr. William Attaway, everyone. Where can people find you? What's your favorite social?
Usually on LinkedIn, you can find me over there, William C, middle initial C, Attaway. And that's the easiest place on socials. You can also go to appreciationatwork.com and catalyticleadership.net. Those are the two websites that talk about the work we do at Appreciation at Work and the coaching that I do for Catalytic Leadership.
Thank you so much, William, for being on the show. And please come back soon.
Simon, thank you for having me. It's been an honor.